Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. I promised that the next video was going to be a Seventh Fleet full-up scenario, and so I'm going to show that to you, as well as I had to add in some new functionality in order to support it. Well, didn't have to, but I decided to because I think it's pertinent for Seventh Fleet, and I wanted to make sure that it was in. So I went over the deployment records um, and these deployment displays, cards, and added in all the stuff for the Allies as well as the Soviets, and add in a bunch of other items that I had determined through research. Okay, so let's go on to this. Okay, so here is this new uh, uh, scenario 13 from 7th Fleet. So 713 World War III. This one has it's it's pretty large as well, and I've added in both a combined 7th Fleet information for the Pacific as well as the 3rd Fleet information that would have been up here. Okay. So for the Americans, that's actually a bonus, right? Because Third Fleet adds in a couple of carriers for the United States for the Third Fleet. Um, but I'll go over that in a second. So, what's the new features that I wanted to add for this? As you can notice, I've added in close defense hexes. Okay, so there are close defense hexes pretty much all over the place on the Pacific map, and these close defense hexes will notice for this scenario, for the Third World War scenario in Seventh Fleet, these three are considered like not in play. So I went ahead and already destroyed them. So I just after I created the after these close defense hexes showed up, I went ahead and selected them for being damaged so that they won't actually function. But any other close defense hex will do two things. Number one, if a surface unit goes through a close defense hex, it will attack it with a um, a strength of 20 in an SSM. Or if it's a sub going through there, it would try to attempt an attack or attempt a detection of 10 ASW points worth. And if it detects it, then it attacks the sub with 10 ASW points. Okay, so as you're moving forces through here, every time you move into one of these hexes, you'll be eligible for attack. Now, Seventh Fleet's like physical game rules give the Japanese like 50 points and 20 points for ASW. I decided to make this a little more generic, and I gave all of the close defense hexes the same score or the same values. And but in for the Japanese, that's kind of a lowering of their capabilities. But as a um, to equal that out, they can attack every time. So in other words, the way the current rules are is you only get attacked by a particular hex one time during the action segment. So now if you were to move through that same place multiple times with the same ship, you get attacked each time. Um, so so that function that does work, and it's tested and it's out on the Google site right now. So this version has now added so both that functionality as well as functionality supporting this 7th Fleet scenario are all available. So the rules included on it give you some rules on how you want to deploy these Japanese forces and American forces. I have added in extra um, ships. For instance, the Taiwanese and the Chinese are neutral to start off with. You can obviously change those to be on anybody's side as you choose. For the Taiwanese, I believe they actually had a couple of extra submarines, so I've actually added those in. And each time I add new ships in, most of the time what I do is I just add them in as that they would come in through a longer and longer lead time. Okay, so Taiwan, is pretty much the same as it normally is, except for a couple of new submarines. The Chinese, I added in more of the Romeos because they actually had more Romeos submarines, as well as the Ming class, which isn't given to the Chinese in the physical game. For the Japanese, the data on the Japanese is pretty good, so I was actually able to find all of the extra like frigates and destroyers. They actually had quite a number of destroyers that were not put into the Seventh Fleet game, but I did the research on them and found those guys, as well as the new Japanese subs that were put in place within the 89 to 91 time frame. I believe it's the Umashio class. Let me check. Um, the Uzoshio class. So that one is not currently captured, I think, in the game, and so I added that in. So what that means is that the Japanese have, actually more capabilities than they have in the normal Seventh Fleet scenario. Their navy is bigger, but it does take a while for those ships to show up. For the Russians, I combined well, let me do the small countries first and then do the big guys later. So Vietnam gets a couple of extra um, OSAs. In fact, they don't have any OSAs to start with, so I gave them the OSAs that they actually had. Some of them I put up here in Haiphong and one down here in Cameron Bay. For the Russians, I added in. So Third Fleet's a little weird, right? Third Fleet has a lot of repetitive shifts between Seventh Fleet and Third Fleet, but Third Fleet also is like the least realistic when it comes to adding in the ships. And like, in fact, the way Third Fleet works is it introduces the Kuznetsov, but it puts the Kuznetsov and the Kiev like in all three theaters, given the different scenarios, right? So it's like it doesn't really know what to do with it. So what I decided to do was for any of the surface ships that are specified in Third Fleet that are not in Seventh Fleet, what I'm simulating is that those guys are going to come in theater, but they're coming in from, say, the Indian Ocean. Okay, so as you could notice here on the right, the Kuznetsov will come in at 42 turns in. Okay, so that's quite a bit, but it does mean that if they hold out long enough, the Russians get another carrier. Okay, um, for the Americans, uh, well, to stay on the Russians, they get more subs. There's more additional subs, and then I've added in additional subs that I have that I researched. Right. I mean, a couple of Victors. I think a Charlie 2. Nothing like game breaking, but I added in additional subs that are going to take a while to actually come in. Okay, so I think if you look at yeah, Vladivostok, right? You got 30 turns out, you get a new Victor, a Foxtrot, and a Kilo. And I think down in Cameron, you get some more as well. And in Petropavlovsk, you get some additional too, a Victor, a Tango, and a Foxtrot as well. Okay? So what that means is that the Russians going to have an additional amount of subs. They're going to have an additional carrier come in late. The Americans, the Third Fleet, if we add in all of the Third Fleet data, which is essentially two new additional submarines, I'm sorry, carriers and a battleship, and quite a number of amphibious. I mean, it's a big improvement for the United States. So what I have is um, I'm basically playing it like the North Pacific is not well guarded at first. So to start the game off, at least the way I've set it up, they have the Princeton group here with the Kearsarge and some escorts at Dutch Harbor, and then a bunch of ships are all coming in. So 9 turns out, you got the America group. 23 turns later, you got a Sturgeon come in. Then another group of destroyers and more um, amphibious ships until finally on 39 turns, the George Washington will show up. So more forces for the Americans, but they are definitely delayed in showing up. Okay. Now, what are the goals of this mission? So in the Third World War mission, um, I've given you the ability to. I've added in the garrison war element, and as well established a lot of the garrison troops here on the mainland of Russia. So the Russians have plenty of troops to use, and their goal is they'll gain points for taking over islands in the Aleutians, okay, um, and Hokkaido. Okay, so the goal is to take Hokkaido as well as the islands in the Aleutians, and they have plenty of troops to do that. Um, they have uh, cargo ships. They don't have a whole lot of amphibious ships. They have mostly cargo ships that can land. They can use the IL-76, which is at on Sakhalin, or not Sakhalin, but on the Kamchatka Peninsula. So, and of course, you can add in, AA ships if you want. Um, the Chinese are neutral, so is the Taiwanese, but I did add in some. Where are they at? Oh, here we go. So about 21 turns in, about a week in, a bunch of um, amphibious assault ships show up. So you do have the capability. I did find those by researching on the Chinese Navy in the late 80s and early 90s. And they had like 5 or 6 amphibious assault ships. So I've added those in. They'll come in delayed. If you leave these guys neutral, then you can't use them. But if you make them align to one side, which means you could also align China to the Soviets to kind of even things out. Then you can play some cool stuff. Let's see what else. So essentially, new close defense logic, as well as a lot of extra forces. Okay, so um, now I want to talk to you a little about like where is the game going to go from here. So this to me is like the last huge scenario that I want to produce. So I think I'm done creating like large scenarios for now. The next thing I want to do is uh, is I want to implement multiplayer. Okay, so I've done some research and I think I figured out a way of it working. Um, Essentially, um, what it might entail is for me to reorganize some of for instance, all the steps that have to happen before, say, the action phase, right? There's no reason why it needs to go each turn, each team going back and forth and needing to, go back and forth. So I can reorganize things a little bit so that you as a player have more time to do your pieces. And then the way we're going to persist data is I've looked at a couple of options. One option is to use FTP files, right? So I created a free FTP file account. I started using that as my initial idea. I think that's probably not the way I'm going to go. I talked with a friend of mine who's a technologist like myself, and he recommended using an Azure database. So my goal is to use an Azure database that essentially, when you come into your main game, you can either choose to do a solitaire game, like the ones we're playing here, or you can choose to play it as um, a multiplayer. Now, how that actually works, I have some time. I need to build it, right? So it's not working yet, but that is my next goal, is to build multiplayer into this. And essentially, the way it's going to kind of work is you're going to establish like when you create a file or when you create a scenario, it'll give you like a unique key for that file, and then you'll just provide that to somebody else. And so whoever you're playing, and like through email or whatever, like you just tell them, hey, log in and say I'm going to join uh, a mission, and there'll be an option to put in that value. And what it'll do is it'll then hook up to that particular. It'll be a very unique number, right? So unless you give it out to everybody, if you only give it to one person, then there's only 2 people are actually going to be using that data. And essentially, what's going to happen is I'm going to try to make it very efficient so that it's not sending the full file each time. I want to minimize the amount of information that's sent over. Both of you will start with the same starting point, and then you'll start going through your turns. And essentially, what that means is, obviously, is if you're playing somebody else, then when you get to the end of your turn, and you move it over to their side, they'll have the ability to do things. And likely, what I'll probably do is have you go into like an admin mode where you can't do anything, but you can still see the map and you can still strategize, but you can't actually do anything. Okay. But you'll be stuck in that mode until they finish, right? And then the game will have an ability for you to like um, likely it'll probably be you'll have to like be in communication with that person, and they say, "Hey, I finished," and then you click a button that says, download their turn, and then it gives you their information, and it'll refresh your screen, and now you'll see it'll be back to your turn again. So that's the goal. It's going to take a little while for me to build that, but I think I have a way of going through with this, and I think that would probably be, to me, that's like the next thing that I think people would look for. I'll put up a poll. I was trying to think of whether to do multiplayer or do single player, but against an AI component or opponent. The thing is, the AI opponent is probably going to be something that was going to take a lot longer to produce. The ability to strategize and have a computer like do moves, it's probably going to be take a long time to do, and probably the first like 20 versions of it is going to be pretty simplistic with a lot of bugs. So I think it makes more sense for folks to give you guys the option of playing against somebody. So in the comments of this video or on the Facebook group when I post a link to this, please let me know if that's something you'd like to play. It's kind of a big investment from my perspective to make this thing multiplayer, and I really only want to do it if there's actually a market for it. So it's my personal opinion that that this game, I love this game, but I understand it is a little bit it's daunting. And as a single player, there's a certain amount of like investments that you have to make in order to like really get into a full solitaire game, that I think that if I were to then offer it as a simple multiplayer where it could be like an I go, you go kind of thing using the construct that I mentioned, that I think that would really add a whole lot of playability to this game. So let me know what you think. Let me know any other features that you're looking to have, but I'm pretty proud of this scenario, and it's pretty big, and obviously you can take away things that you don't want to give. You can look at what I've set up, you can vector off that and take whatever you want. But essentially, it's the entire Seventh Fleet Order of Battle, plus essentially the entire Third Fleet Order of Battle, plus expansion ships that I found for these navies from doing a lot of research. So, hey, I appreciate your time. I wanted to make this quick and short and get the idea of multiplayer out to folks. So hopefully over this weekend, I'll get some good feedback. I will be on vacation for a little while, so I probably won't be able to get a version that does that multiplayer out for quite a while, but I want to get started on it very quickly. So anyway, appreciate your time, and until next time, I'll talk to you later.